So the first sub-theme that we're going to look at is understanding change and its impact. And we're going to look at this in 4 sections. How we might categorise different sorts of changes, how change affects us, so in terms of our feelings and our thoughts and our behaviour, and drawing out the fact that we all respond rather differently to the challenge of change, common responses to change, and why change can feel scary and quite difficult at times. Throughout the theme at all of the age ranges, different sorts of changes are identified and discussed. So we've got big and small changes, those that happen naturally and those that we make happen or choose, those that are comfortable and welcome and those that aren't, those that are chosen, those that are imposed on us, and so on. So as children get older, their understanding of these different sorts of changes is developed through building on the work done previously in that spiral curriculum way that we've discussed earlier. And on this slide, you'll see some of the activities as kind of the warm-up activities, if you like, the circle games and rounds and so on. And they're just nice examples of those. They're inclusive, they're fun, they're interactive, and really importantly, they don't depend on children's literacy skills, because the sort of children who gain the most from this kind of work are often those who are quite demotivated by literacy-based activities. So the SEAL materials do focus on kind of making this stuff fun, and these are just some that you can look up if you want to, that are quite nice activities for introducing the longer learning activities. The gossip game we're going to look at in some detail in a little while. The topic links to a number of progression steps, mainly within What Matters Statement 2 for health and wellbeing, and this focuses on how we respond to our experiences. So this theme on changes is one where learners are encouraged to both reflect on past experiences, but also crucially to anticipate future ones and how they might manage them. And they look in some detail at the changes they've been through and those changes that they're going to be going through in the future. And as always, the SEAL materials, there's a kind of similar progression in learning outcomes that can be found in the overview booklet for each of the themes. As well as identifying different sorts of change, learners undertake a range of activities at different ages that highlight how we all respond differently. Rather like adults, we vary in our kind of comfort level with different levels of risk, some of us being comfortable with high levels of risk and some of us being very risk averse. And this is a lovely quiz, I think, that's on the website that a teacher has developed for work in their Year 3 class, looking at how different people might find different sorts of changes comfortable or less comfortable. Just take a moment to kind of have a quick look at some of those changes and how it works. The same kind of theme is here. In Year 5, there's an activity which looks at the different responses of 2 children in Year 1 when they're told that they're going to be going to the seaside as a treat. And there's 2 children in the class who don't respond in the same way as the majority of the class, who are cheering and very happy at the thought of ice creams and paddling in the sea and sunshine and all the rest of it. That's Jack and Rihanna. And it looks at why they're responding quite differently and actually quite scared and upset at the prospect of this trip. For Jack, it's things that have happened in the past related to the water that has scared him. And in Rihanna's case, it's a worry about having to show her legs, which she knows that's something that girls in her family are not supposed to do. So it kind of explores how people may have different responses to change for different reasons. And a teacher developed this quite nicely, I think, by using two characters who differed in their appetite for change, and to use them as poles on a scale. So the students were asked to arrange themselves on a line according to whether they were more like Rosie, little pen picture of Rosie there, or Rafiq, and a similar pen picture of Rafiq there too. And the key learning that everybody finds change more or less challenging in different ways emerges quite nicely from this activity. And then a nice little bit I thought that this particular teacher used following this activity was to look at sayings or proverbs around change, and asking kind of what they meant, having a look at what was the kind of underlying message of them, and which of these characters would be more likely to say them, and then which they personally agreed with. So quite a good development of a SEAL activity. The other thing that strikes me about this sort of activity is quite a nice way to introduce differences between children in the class or the school. Children with ADHD, for example, often enjoy change as it keeps their interest, while those on the autistic spectrum can find even minor changes of routine quite difficult to cope with. And it can set the scene quite nicely for kind of discussion about how the school aims to meet everybody's needs, and that sometimes this means doing things differently for different students, which is an important discussion to have, of course, in every school. I like this activity. Again, this is an activity which features slightly different formats in Year 3 and again in Year 7. There is a really important caveat on this one. Make sure, of course, that any child who's experienced a kind of difficult events in their past should be considered in terms of their vulnerability. So some teachers like to talk to children individually that they've identified as potentially finding this kind of activity difficult, maybe find alternatives for them, or to do it in small groups, or to do it on a one-to-one basis with an adult that they trust. There's lots of different ways of doing it. There is also an activity in the gold set, which is, you may remember from other videos, the set in each theme that can be sent home for parents and families to do together. And there's a kind of similar activity to this that can be done at home before undertaking it in class. And another thing that you can do that's quite strongly recommended is that you model this, with your own life journey, sharing perhaps some of those things that have been a bit tricky, changes that you may have found a little bit difficult to cope with, any that you're comfortable to share, of course, with the children. So once they have done their kind of life journey picture, if you like, of significant events in their lives, you can use it to stick on emoticons. So how did they feel about the changes, different levels of difficulty, or challenge, whether they found change comfortable or uncomfortable. You could compare children's experiences, which are common and which do not many of the children go through, whether things are shared or not. Photos can be shared, and again, being careful that those perhaps who don't have photos of their earlier life, such as asylum seekers or refugees, or perhaps those children who were taken into care during their early years, but managing it in the same way as previously. So there's quite a lot of follow-up work that can be done around that single activity. Okay, this is a little video that you hopefully will be able to watch. Just a couple of minutes of this. It's a great way to demonstrate change over time visually. You can use it with older students, perhaps as a stimulus activity. This is a portrait of Vince from when he was not born to when he was 18 years. The father, incidentally, is a filmmaker in the Netherlands, and he wanted to capture the changes to his son Vince because they were happening so fast. And he started filming him once a week, making this incredible kind of coming of age time-lapse portrayal to show his son. And he says, which I think is quite moving, You are witness to one of the most mysterious, profound processes of human life, aging, the process of becoming older and growing up, accelerated into 3.45 minutes. So if you can take a couple of minutes to watch that now, that would be great. Just thinking about it, and if you share it with students, you know, getting them to think about what changes, where are the changes, what are the changes that they can see over time. And of course, you can do the same, thinking about the changes you can see, but also those all-important changes that are going on beneath the surface. Activity here from the SEAL materials, this MELANIE'S journal, which is provided in the Year 5 materials, follows the events of the emotional ups and downs as well of Melanie's life from January, when her parents announced that they're going to be moving to a new place, to the end of September when the move has happened. And the children are invited to consider how a big change like this can feel rather like a loss, and you know, the kind of common reactions that we can all go through when there's a big change like this in our lives. And those common reactions can include shock and denial and anger, and eventually acceptance. They're invited to consider how her feelings and thoughts affect her behaviour when she starts in her new school, reinforcing this theme that runs through all social and emotional learning, the whole of SEAL, that feelings and thoughts and behaviours are all kind of interlinked. So that's a really important and good demonstration through this activity. Then again, students' understanding of change is returned to in the secondary materials. This activity is in a place to be in for Year 7, and it looks again at that kind of process of change from a slightly different activity. This final bit about why are we afraid of change, or why does change make us feel wary, is dealt with and explored in Year 6, and it fits in really well, I think, for Year 6 students who are on the doorstep of that transition to secondary school. And I think it's really relatable, you know, to many of us as adults, because we know, don't we, that in unfamiliar environments, we're often much more wary, you know, we're much more easily startled than when we're somewhere we know well, or if you watch cats or, you know, animals in a kind of environment they're not familiar with, compared to their behaviour in an environment that they are familiar with, it's very different. And this activity and this kind of explanation, which I'll give you a moment to read, kind of provides quite a good explanation of this. Excuse me. This is another one, a short clip that we'd like you to watch if you're able to now. It's designed actually for business leaders, but we found it very useful for upper primary and secondary students on the theme of why we can be very wary of change. And Kerry Freeman here explains our brain is wired to detect threat, to be liked, and to prefer consistency. So it's easy to see really how change can impact on all of this. We link this to the work on Maslow's hierarchy, which children learn about in Year 6, and we'll look at that when we come on to the topic of Key Stage 2-3 transition. So watch this, it's only a short clip, but quite enlightening and useful to share with young people. In terms of developing this aspect of the theme, the resources from the Beano School of Laughs can be quite helpful here. You can see some there on the slide. Beano, the comic, and Young Minds have collaborated to actually produce 6 lessons for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 on mental health and wellbeing. And this lesson 5 focuses specifically on change and different ways to manage it. So it fits very, very well within this theme. They can all be found on the website, on the SEAL website. This resource contains some lovely ideas for hot seating change situations. So many of you will be familiar with hot seating. And here are some questions to ask. There they are. Did you expect this change to happen? How does it make you feel? How have your feelings changed your behaviour? Or sorry, have your feelings changed your behaviour? And if so, how? What challenges might you face now? What worries you about what's going to happen? Can you think of anything that might make you feel better? Have you had this feeling before? Can you think of any positive things that might come out of this? So these are really good questions to get children thinking about any particular change. Another part of the SEAL kind of session structure, if you like, is this opportunity that it suggests that you give children and young people to reflect and to review, and they're built into the health and wellbeing and social and emotional learning sessions. So for older learners, you might explore quotes such as this as part of a kind of plenary or a review. And, you know, for this one, life is like riding a bicycle. In order to keep your balance, you must keep moving. This is an Einstein quote, and you might like to just challenge students to think about this and then come up with questions themselves about it to ask each other. Or you might just ask them, what do you think Einstein meant by this? Can we decide not to change if we want to? And so on. And now it's your opportunity to have some time to reflect and to maybe apply some of this learning to your own situations. And just a reminder, really, that it's one of the key things about social and emotional learning is that we do need to engage with it ourselves, as well as teaching or using the activities with young people. So engaging with these activities ourselves as adults, it's a really important part. It's very different doing something yourself to watching others do it and responding to their work. So, you know, it's just a good reminder that social and emotional learning really is for everybody, not just for children. And it's about that doing and experiencing it here, and not just that kind of cognitive knowing about. So if you'd like to pause the presentation now, you can have a look at the tasks suggested on the slide, whether you're working alone or within a group.